I'm 38 years old, and my name is Alina Vasquez. A silver minivan pulled up in my graveled driveway 5 Saturdays after I received the keys to my first home, and my sister came out with her 2 children, 2 luggage, and a grin that made the previous 3 years seem unreal. The same sister that testified for my ex-husband while seated in the witness chair during my divorce trial. For that gravel, that porch, that act, I had worked myself to death. My name is the only one on the deed. That morning, Dana said something rather audacious on my doorstep. But the part I still find hard to comprehend is what my family did on a Sunday 2 weeks later that I will never forget. Here at Inheritance Chronicles, welcome back. Women who rebuilt their lives from nothing tell what it cost them and what they wouldn't give up on this channel. This narrative begins with a marriage, travels via trial, and concludes on a driveway. So please leave a comment below and make sure to subscribe if stories about family, betrayal, and hard one-piece resonate with you. Additionally, each gravel stone was paid for twice. You have to go back 4 years to when I was 34 and believed I was a partner in order to understand how a sister finds up on the wrong side of a courtroom. On the eastern side of Harland Falls, Ohio, my husband Greg had a 6-bay business called Hartley Auto and Tire. That's the full thing, in my opinion. He owned it. The firm was housed inside a corporation that Greg founded 2 years prior to our nuptials. When he got inventive, I kept the finances straight, managed the service desk, made the estimates, and twisted wrenches when we were short a guy, which was most weeks. We were awarded the 30-vehicle county fleet contract because their management trusted me and everyone knew it. I requested Greg to add my name to the business twice. He smiled twice and answered, "Next quarter, no." His smile might sell a state inspector a corroded frame. One oil-stained day at a time, I gave the store 11 years of my life, yet my name never appeared on any significant page. The rear office included a tiny safe. In the same manner that some men maintain a mistress, Greg maintained the combination. Quiet, intimate, and exclusive to him. Every marriage has a locked drawer someplace, I assured myself. Back then, I could afford to lie like that. The store smelt like burned coffee and broken dust. And I cherished it in the same way that you cherish a kid you are unable to name. Looking back, no one wanted to check in since the signs were piled up like a parts order. I looked over the rest of the building. I was never able to do an inventory on my own spouse. I'll make it brief since it's not beautiful, but here is what you need to know about my family. When I was 19 and Dana was 12, my father, Ray Fields, passed away from a heart attack. The only person who ever asked me what I wanted was him, a machinist who had purchased a second-hand Craftsman toolbox the year I was born. Carol, my mother, went black for around 6 months after the burial, the type of darkness in which the utility bill remains unread. In order to become the family's load-bearing wall, I left the technical program I had begun and accepted a job at a quick lube. When Dana was 13, I covered the cost of her summer camp. When she was 16, I bought her prom outfit. Every time Dana tripped, my mom would say something that sounded like a prayer, and I was able to catch her. "You are the one with strength." She spoke it as if it were written on me at the factory, much as you would read a label on a machine. I recall giving Dana cash for the prom gown. I had made money by sleeping under lorries. "You'll be fine," she murmured, taking it without looking up. "You're always okay." She was 16. She was already familiar with the family math. My job title was fine. I misunderstood need for love. To be really honest with you, I continued to make that error for a very long time. Throughout, there was a price tag on everything. I just hadn't received the bill yet. I got Dad's toolbox since no one else wanted to move it. For 19 years, I carried it with me every place I went. Money is inherited by certain individuals. I inherited the ability to make other people's life better, and a family that believed the repair was free. Like motors, marriages have warning lights. My own began to show the fall. It was my 34th birthday. Greg's phone started dozing off. On Thursday evenings, inventory runs returned empty. He had the fragrance of a place we had never been to, I work as a mechanic. I don't disregard hope and brightness. I extract the code. On a Thursday, I noticed his vehicle parked behind the dealership across town, next to a red coupe that belonged to Brittany, the finance lady who had flirted with him at every trade fair since the beginning of time. I went home and asked him directly after sitting there long enough to be certain. No yelling at our own kitchen table. He didn't even try to refute it. "Let's keep this civilized, nor need to burn the shop down over it," he added, folding his hands like a lone cop. The store. The first thing that sprang to mind was the shop. Since I discovered the back office safe hanging open a week later, mine should have been as well. When Greg was preoccupied, he was irresponsible. I also read the contents. The bank statements for an account I had never seen, the business documents dating back more than our marriage, his name alone, and consistent money leaving the store and going elsewhere labeled improvements. It had been 3 years since we had remodeled anything, not even a bathroom faucet. I realized I wasn't reading a husband's papers as I stood in that office with the thermostat ticking. While I was still placing my birthday cake order, I was reviewing an escape strategy. I didn't take any pictures. I just shut the safe and began mentally listing everything that my hands had constructed, but that my name had never come into contact with. The next week, I recruited Alvarez, a petite office lady who did not sugarcoat and wore reading spectacles on a chain. She presented it simply. It was premarital property, the store. His business, his name. My goal was to demonstrate what the law refers to as active appreciation, that my efforts had increased the company's worth during the marriage. I had untangled 11 years' worth of projections, fleet accounts, and payroll. If those who had visited the store supported me, we could display everything. My list included Marcy, the bookkeeper Greg had fired the previous year. Dana was, too. After her second layoff, my sister worked at our front desk for 2 years, taking calls that I paid her to take. She had seen who was in charge there. Family witnesses read well with judges, according to Alvarez, and I recall feeling almost relieved. Greg, meanwhile, moved as if he had practiced. On a Tuesday, my shop system log died. My key to the building I had opened at 6 in the morning, for 10 years became a memento when the locks were changed on a Friday. The account for improvements for more over 2 years, Alvarez's forensic expert discovered that money had been being sent to a soft, difficult-to-trace location. Every action I took was guided by the text. Not a single dollar was taken. Since clean was all I had left that was entirely mine, I wanted to win clean. Then, on a gloomy March afternoon, Alvarez phoned to inform me that the other side had submitted their list of witnesses. She read the names slowly, and she read one of them twice. His list included my sister's name. I was there in that rented kitchen, doing the arithmetic, denying the answer, clutching the phone, and listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My younger sister buried me in the county courtroom hearing chamber, which had carpet the color of rotten gum and fluorescent lighting. Dana didn't even glance at me from the witness chair while wearing a blue outfit I had never seen. Under evidence, she said that I had always referred to the store as Greg's company, that I identified as an employee, that I was impetuous with money, and that she had heard me lament my own careless spending. I should be thankful that after 11 years of labor, she delivered it in the flat voice of someone reading a script they had prepared in a bathroom mirror. Where she could, Alvarez opposed. It didn't really matter. Remember, courts are receptive to family witnesses. It is easy to interpret both ways. That day, my mother sat in the gallery on Dana's side of the aisle with her handbag on her lap and her eyes ahead, as if she were at a church service she didn't really like but wouldn't consider leaving. I met up with Dana in the hallway vending machines during recess. I didn't scream. One question I posed to her: why? She glanced at everything that wasn't me, including the candy bars and the machine. After that, she gave me the response she had been giving me since she was 16. You'll be okay. You're always okay. After that, she returned to the room where she had just vowed to be honest. I finally heard that phrase for what it was as I stood there holding my quarters. It wasn't trust in me. Everyone I loved signed a permission sheet, allowing me to steal everything I had because the strong one regrows what you chop off. They all thought that. I had also believed it, and the bill for thinking it was going to be due. Early in June, the decision was made. The store was Greg's untouchable premarital property. My own sister's evidence undermined my active appreciation claim, which was resolved with a $40,000 buyout after 11 years. Let's call it $10 a day. One evening, I completed the divide and regretted it. He also took the rented home with him. The lease has his name on it. His landlord friend is glad to retain him. I had 2 weeks to pick up my personal belongings from the store. My dad's Craftsman toolbox was the only item I grabbed. The top drawer included an old handwritten bill of sale with the name Fields, and every drawer was purchased by Ray Fields the year I was born. Therefore, even Greg's attorney was unable to act differently. On a Tuesday morning, while 2 technicians I had trained pretended to be busy, I wheeled it across the parking lot. Greg was relaxed as a landlord as he stood at the Bay 1 entrance, sipping his coffee. He lifted his cup as I arrived at my pickup and said, "No hard feelings, nor." I didn't give him the mirror check he was waiting for. Instead, I drove off his property after running the box up the ramp and strapping it down. My mom eventually gave me a call that evening. I waited for it to ring twice while sitting on a floor mattress before responding. To be honest, there was still a part of me that thought she would inquire where I was sleeping. She didn't inquire. She said that Dana had endured a great deal due to Kyle's indebtedness and that the family needed to move on. She continued by saying that she would take the phrase like a casserole to every subsequent catastrophe. "Nora, don't turn this into a conflict. Your sister is also having difficulties, having trouble. Everything I owned fit against one wall when I glanced around the room. Above the coin laundry on 2nd Street, I leased a room. The kind of place where the dryers beat like a pulse under your floor till 10 o'clock at night. You didn't request it. I took a seat with a legal pad on the first night and did an inventory since that's how I de-stress. As of that afternoon, I had 1 toolbox, $40,000, 2 hands with 20 years of certificates, no obligations, and no one I owed an explanation to. I blocked Dana, my mom, and Greg's number. I didn't block. I just stopped responding. It's the difference between just not standing indoors anymore and slamming a door, if you've never noticed. I scribbled the 4th thing on the pad slowly, in big letters, as if it were a work order. One name will be on the next object I construct. I'm being honest with you because I understand how this sounds. It sounds chilly. A lady who quits picking up is a scandal where I'm from. Additionally, a guy who uses a secondary account to empty a marriage is only business-minded. I had been the net beneath everyone's high-wire performance for 16 years. There is no turn on the wire for the net. I folded the net as a result. 3 years. It need that. And because those years weren't very dramatic, I'll take you through them swiftly. Simply put, they were hefty. But as we go, I want you to take note of one thing. I always thought that safety and distance were synonymous. I thought that if I constructed far enough away from my family, they wouldn't be able to harm it. That was a mistake on my part. For those who have had to rebuild, this is what it really looks like. It seems to be a cargo vehicle that is 9 years old. I used my dad's skills to bring it back to life on a Sunday after purchasing it at auction for $3,800. I wrote my own letters on the side. Days of reasonable charges for one woman's mobile repair services. I mended things that folks couldn't afford to tow by driving the van to driveways and church parking lots. 4 shifts a week, including nights I walked concrete till 2 in the morning while pulling orders at the parts warehouse at the county boundary. I performed break work for widows on Sundays after the service for half the shop charge, and the ladies paid me back in cash. Greg was never able to understand what they were saying. More people in Harland Falls heard about the trustworthy mechanic woman than any advertisement I could have purchased. The county fleet manager phoned me personally, informed me that since I left Hartley's, their business had declined, and transferred the whole 30-vehicle contract to my van. I got 5 hours of sleep every night. I sat on a milk crate to have lunch. Like a patient monitoring a monitor, I tacked a savings goal to the dashboard and watched the figure rise. People wonder why I didn't just relocate and start fresh. My name was unknown, because I was also from Harland Falls. I was determined not to let the individuals who had stolen the store to steal the map, since I had earned every wrench I possessed there. Tell me in the comments if you've ever declined to be the one to leave. The toughest part of this narrative wasn't the effort, which is why I read them and stay. The task was easy. 3 years later, the hard part wearing my sister's face drove up my gravel. Nevertheless, stopping for a tow truck that had died on the side of Route 9 on a rainy Tuesday during my second year completely transformed my life. The lifeless wrecker belonged to Novik's Garage, a 4-bay business on the town's western fringe that had been since before I was even born. Walt Novik, a 71-year-old man with hands like tree roots and a flannel shirt, sat behind the wheel. The fuel pump relay had burned itself. When he inquired about what he owed me, I gave him an accurate quotation that included the part plus 20 minutes of work. I had one in the vehicle and had switched it on the shoulder in the rain. It took him longer to look at the invoice than it did to do the task. Most individuals wave a bill to seem saintly or pad it for an elderly guy who is stuck. It seemed that an honest number read like poetry. He offered me weekend bays at his store over the phone the next week. No strings, overflow work. Novik's was sturdy yet worn. The kind of store where nothing significant is damaged and the floor jack is older than the apprentice. 2 springs ago, Walt had buried his wife. There are no children involved in the profession. He didn't say anything while he watched me work like an old machinist, moving more slowly than he wanted to. Nothing is missing. A little hand-painted board was hanging on the office wall next to a calendar from a parts supplier that failed in the 1990s. The paint has become amber. Reasonable cost. Paid in full. No favors. I once questioned him about it. He said that his father painted it the week the store opened, and that it had saved the company around 12 times while costing the family some friends. I didn't write anything down. Didn't have to. Certain phrases suit you like a press fit. You don't realize they're keeping the whole assembly together until much later. Walt began phoning me on Tuesdays to discuss tasks that his young tech Denny was having trouble with. Then on Tuesdays, he began phoning me about nothing. I was unaware that I was being interviewed by the elderly guy. He was aware. At 11 o'clock at night, I discovered the truth about my sister on a loading dock. The way the truth acts, uninvited and off-duty. Greg's former accountant, Marcy Bell, accepted a desk job at the parts warehouse, and during one slow shift, we ended ourselves putting cores side by side. She inquired about my well-being. Then, with a weighty silence, she revealed that something had been bothering her for the last 2 years. She had access to the shop's finances at the conclusion of her notice period, 2 weeks before to my trial. She saw Greg use a credit line to cut a $18,000 check. She also overheard him telling my sister's husband, Kyle, over the phone that their vehicle loan had been paid off and that another check would be sent after things had calmed down. Greg referred to it as keeping the family neat. Marcy said that if she hadn't signed documents on her way out and needed her pension, she would have come out at the time, but she was still embarrassed. And I was honest with her, telling her that it wouldn't have mattered or been acceptable. Math was what was important. The sticker price of my sister's allegiance was $18,000, which is about how much I had spent on her over the course of all those years of camps, outfits, and rescues. Greg, like a guy picking up a repossessed vehicle, had just purchased the asset out from under me. Because the orders don't pull themselves, I clocked out, spent some time sitting in my vehicle in the lot with my hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, and then returned to complete the shift. Marcy stroked my arm at the entryway and spoke softly as if the boxes were listening. To be honest, he never sent the second check. I want you to keep that particular information in mind. It's a detail that bears weight. It returns. My mother maintained a voicemail campaign with the rigor of a utility company for all 3 of those years. Some of them were kept, but not as proof. Just so I wouldn't have to ponder later whether I would invent the pattern, there was no case to construct. Not a single message inquired about my residence. Nobody inquired about my eating, sleeping, or cooking habits. They had questions for me. Ruth's is hosting Thanksgiving, and it won't look good if you're not present. Your sister inquires about you, and because Dana's public life went off without a hitch and nothing ever went my way, I knew the same thing you do by checking. And the large one spoke in a church-like tone. When all else has taken Nora, family is what's left. I need you to know that my mother is not a monster because if you put her in the monster bin, this tale would not work. Every time her brothers fell, the lady who reared her took them in. For 2 years in the 1990s, she took in her own brother Dale's son, and in her math, the great lift, the falling forever. No bill. And the term family refers to the lifting. She wasn't requesting anything from me that she hadn't already paid for herself. That's why it was so difficult to despise her, and why avoiding her was so important. I still received a birthday card in my P.O. box every October. Her penmanship is becoming a bit unsteady. I folded a $20 inside as if I were 12. I preserved all of the cards. Every 20 I sent them back. People may be loved at a distance. You are able to endure. I discovered that over a laundry. It became easy, in my opinion. However, it never became simpler. Simply said, it became quieter. Walt Novick then made the decision to retire. Then the silence came to an end. On a Tuesday while sipping coffee from his old percolator. He informed me that his niece had filed their notice, and that he was offering the property in the spring garage together, with the 2-bedroom home on the same lot, which he and his wife had lived in for 40 years. The house was located 30 steps from Bay 1 across a gravel yard. The bundle cost $310,000, according to the realtor. Walt uttered what I can still hear in his voice before it becomes public after seeing me take in the number. It's yours to earn. You desire it. Fair price, full payment, no favors. His language was straightforward and uncomplicated. He wanted the business to remain a shop, and he determined that I would be the one to do it. He would carry a note personally for $130,000, 10 years at 6%. I was responsible for raising the rest. I had $92,000, 40 from the settlement that I would never allow myself to touch, and 52 more from working double shifts for 3 years, which added up $100 at a time. I presented my books to the neighborhood bank, which still recognizes its clients by their trucks. I also brought the county fleet contract and a folder with 3 years' worth of revenue from mobile repairs, which made the loan officer sit up straight. With each number added, they filled the void. I received no benefits from anybody. Furthermore, I'm not bragging when I guide you via the arithmetic. I'm taking you through it because a bunch of folks will stand on that gravel and tell me that none of this matters in about 20 minutes. The night before closing, I stayed up till 3. I wasn't keeping my eyes open because of the debt. I had nothing that anybody could handle for 19 years. There would be something now. Possessing anything is a kind of terror in and of itself. The closing day took place on a Friday morning in September at a title office with terrible landscape paintings and delicious coffee. 11 signatures. Because endings and torque are important, I numbered them the same way you count lug nuts. The deed was then printed simply as a components label. Nora Fields is the only name on the owner line. Greg didn't start this business prior to getting married. Not a lease under a friend. One name, mine, on a roof, walls, and land, documented at the county so that anybody may see it long after I'm gone. Walt offered me both sets of keys on a simple steel ring after giving me a firm shake of his hand, similar to how you would seat a hose clamp. I performed the one ceremony that mattered to me that afternoon. After backing the van up to Bay 1 and dropping the ramp, I dragged my father's Craftsman toolbox across the concrete to the left-hand corner, the exact position where he had kept it when I was a youngster watching him work from a milk carton at the Cedar Street home. That box had spent 19 years in exile, in garages, leased apartments, and the back of a vehicle. I stood in the empty store with my palm flat on the lid for a bit after using my boot to set the wheel locking. You would have assumed that I was inspecting the paint if you had entered. I slept on an inflatable mattress in the center of the vacant living room that night. Moonlight was all over the floor, there were no curtains yet, and I could hear the gravel settle and the furnace tick. The sounds of a structure conversing with its owner. I had that sensation for 5 Saturdays. Before it came up the driveway to renegotiate, the world offered me 5 Saturdays. I also want to treat everyone fairly. That is 5 more than I had previously received. The sign, Field's Garage, Sales and Service, went up on a Monday. Every woman in the trades will know the tiny line under it as a dare. Owner, Nora Fields. Every woman who worked a counter expects me to claim that the first week went well. I washed my hands on the cloth, gave him my card, and saw his software update in real time when a guy in a dually demanded to speak with the owner. It did update, to his credit. When the actual mechanic will arrive was a question posed by 2 callers. Denny stayed on. Walt's 24-year-old tech is in excellent hands but has a poor tendency of diagnosing guests. One work order at a time, I've been sanding him off. Like a regular maintenance item, Walt himself stopped by every Tuesday at 10. Used precise change to purchase coffee from the machine, even if it was always free for him. The rarest kind of love I have ever experienced was when he sat in his old chair by the window and gave me no counsel at all until I asked. With just enough money left over for a pizza, the first month's earnings paid for the mortgage, the note to Walt, parts, Denny, and insurance. A margin, no miracle. I've only ever asked for margins. Walt had placed his father's little hand-painted board, wrapped in a store towel like a relic, in a drawer before I opened it, and I comprehended the message just as he had meant. I covered it with a frame and hung it behind the register so you couldn't miss it when making a payment. Fair price, full payment, no favors. I was asked by a client whether it had anything to do with religion. The closest thing I have, I told her. She chuckled. I wasn't totally kidding, and I would soon discover how serious I was. There are no newspapers in a town like Harland Falls. It passes via hoods that are open. I was informed by a fleet driver delivering a plow vehicle that 2 of Hartley's top technicians had quit due to unpaid invoices. Greg's account had gone cash on delivery, which in our world is the sound of a heart monitor slowing down, according to a talkative parts representative. Since I was the one who had kept the wound healed for all those years, I understood better than anybody what its departure would do. The county contract, which I now own, had been the backbone of that shop's financial flow. I've heard that Brittany's red coupe was last seen leaving town in the spring. I want to be specific about why I didn't celebrate any of it since it affects how the tale concludes. My triumph is not a guy drowning. Water just finds its level. And I didn't have time to stand on the bank and observe since I had a ton of work. The other piece of information arrived via the family channel, which is how all official family news is disseminated. From Aunt Ruth to my mother via the church lobby to me. Dana lost the vehicle, the children, and a mortgage 3 months after Kyle left her, and moved to Texas for a job that could or might not have existed. This is the portion that finally completed a loop that had been open for me since a loading dock 2 years before. The renowned $18,000 in loyalty money associated with the card debt had never been paid off. Greg never received his second check. The balance was now held by a collection agency, and it had been growing teeth the whole time. My sister sold me out for loyalty, but it turned out to be a broken promise from a guy who finally broke everything. It was on a Thursday when I learned. Unfavorable news spreads like family. On Saturday, a name that hadn't been on my phone in 3 years appeared. Exclamation points resembled confetti in the first sentence, which read, "Heard about the shop. So proud of you, sis. We ought to catch up." It has nothing to do with a courtroom. A blue dress on a witness chair is not appealing. After 3 years of stillness, she opens with pride, as if it were her own to give me what I had constructed in the crater she assisted in digging. Standing under Walt's little board at the register, I read it but chose not to respond. 5 days later, the second text arrived. The residence has 2 bedrooms, according to Mom. I'll bet it's lovely. And there it is. Since it isn't a compliment, I assumed there was a tape measure. That's an evaluation. Additionally, I had been reading Dana's evaluation since she was 16. My response, which was entirely in lowercase, stung, removed it, typed one that was cooler, a lawyer's response. I also deleted it. Sitting at my kitchen table in the home with only one name on the deed, I must have written her a dozen responses over the course of 2 nights, and I had to explain myself in each translation. At some point after midnight, I realized that I was no longer submitting the family's oldest tax because I had to justify myself. I turned the phone face down. I wish I could tell you that I slept most of the time. As I lay there, I could hear my own home holding its breath. Boundaries may sometimes seem powerful, according to people. For the most part, they feel like standing still in their work boots as they wait to learn the price. I was in Bay 1 under a commercial truck with a troublesome transmission line on the 5th Saturday after shutting in the middle of the morning when I heard tires go off the road into my gravel. Slow and confident, a car that knew it had reached its destination. Even before I saw the color, I recognized the engine. When we were still sisters, I would have mendied a silver minivan with a worn-out belt squeak for free. Like a game show hostess, Dana emerged from the driver's seat with her arms spread wide and her sunglasses up into her hair. Look at this sight, my goodness. 8-year-old Tyler followed her out on his elbows, and 5-year-old Emmy pulling a backpack with a unicorn on it. And I felt a hook in my chest when I saw those children. Since none of what was coming was their fault, I want to be truthful. I then noticed the others. On the gravel, 2 luggage. Garbage bags with the sleeves pulled up against the plastic. The fast exit baggage was fastened to the roof rack. A blue tarp covers a folded rollaway mattress. She hadn't come to interrogate me. She would arrive prepared with the solution. While I was still wiping transmission fluid off my knuckles, she was chatting all the way up my porch steps. The words are practiced in a fluid manner that only seems informal to those who aren't paying careful attention. And I've been paying careful attention for 3 years. The second bedroom might be shared by the children. They sleep well. Until we find a solution, I'll take the sofa. Of course, it's just temporary. Then she turned on the top step, looking at my shop, my roof line, and my yard before delivering the phrase she had written clearly on the drive over, which was meant to put an end to the debate before it had begun. You now have all of this, Nora, and we are family. All of this is yours. That statement encompasses a whole religion, and because I grew up in it, I am familiar with all of its hymns. The strong one is a public utility, and what is yours is available for distribution. With both hands wrapped around the strap of her unicorn backpack, Emmy shyly waved at me from the gravel. Since my arguments have never included children, I waved back at her. I then turned to face my sister and told her the truth. You can't live here, Dana. The way I quote a break job is how I put it. Final, priced, and level. She blinked as if I had spoken something in a strange tongue. To be honest, I had in our household. After that, I stood on my porch and watched them all arrive as she cycled through her gears. First, sugar, sisters support one another. Do you recall the time we shared a room? The children love you. The second gear. Guilt. Smooth as a downshift, she grabbed for it. They are at a hotel to sleep. Look at those, Nora. Take a look at their faces. Yes, I did look. That is the awful mechanics of it. Like a torque wrench, she pointed her own kids at me. The family's national anthem, the third gear, is the dependable old one. Half snorts through her hand toward my home and yelled from my top step. You'll be okay. What does it really mean to you because you're always all right? In a courthouse corridor, there I was, 16 years old, returning my prom dress money, 28 years old. And now the same phrase on my doorstep, because it had never let her down before. Something settled inside of me, as silent as a wheel bearing that was at last seated. You can earn a place here, I said. She looked at me and said, you can't claim one. She probably didn't understand it. Then, no. Our family didn't speak any of the languages. I was branded selfish by her. I knew precisely what the trip over had sounded like when she stated, "Mom was right about you." She put the children back in. Through the window, Emmy continues to wave at me. "Help me, God," and sprayed it by quickly reversing down my gravel. As I waited there, I heard the belt screech fade in the direction of Route 9. I looked at my timepiece. Without any sense of humor, I recall believing that my mother's phone call would be connected before she crossed the county road. The family mobilized in less than 2 days. And by family, I mean the whole system, including blood, marriage, church pews, and grocery stores. My mother was the first to call, and it was obvious that she had prepared her opening statement in advance. "I didn't bring you up to turn away infants." Next to call was Aunt Ruth. Ruth, who hadn't called me since my divorce, told me that everyone at First Baptist was inquiring about it. Everybody. And what was she meant to convey to others? 2 women from my mother's Bible study stared at me at the grocery store on Maple, the way you look at a car, parked across 2 spaces. The man, who identified himself as my cousin Roy, whom I last saw at a funeral in another decade, left a voicemail that began with, "Hey, stranger," and ended with, "You know she's got those kids." For personal reasons, one of my frequent clients had to cancel an appointment. They did not rebook. And I want you to see the same sight I saw while I was standing in my business at closing time. A phone buzzing over the counter in a sideways manner. Nobody, not a single individual, inquired as to why Dana had lost her home during any of the calls, messages, or pleasant voices. Nobody inquired about Kyle's whereabouts, the amount of the debt, how it became so large, or her future plans. The network as a whole merely wanted to know why I refused to give up mine. The system only acknowledges the controversy that the strong ones are aware of. I read the comments, and it's essential to me that we can see each other, so if you've ever been that person, the one whose rejection creates more indignation than everyone else's chaos, please use the term strong. Then pay attention because, when on a delivery run on Wednesday night, I passed the First Baptist parking lot. What I saw parked in the far corner beneath the security light grabbed all of my rage and turned it into something more complex. Under the light, the minivan was parked in the corner of the church lot. The address is the manner in which you park your car. The back windows were jam-packed to the brim. The curled mattress, laundry baskets, and a light resting on its side as if it had given up. The light in the dome was on. Tyler worked on his schoolwork on a cooler lid while sitting in the open side door. The workbook was slanted in the direction of the security light. With her arms wrapped over the unicorn bag, Emmy was dozing off across the middle seats. Dana was sitting in the driver's seat with her face pressed to the wheel. I couldn't tell that she was sobbing. She was simply parked in every way that a person can be. I stopped on the other side of the street and spent around 10 minutes sitting in the dark without running my engine. And I'm going to tell you precisely what I saw because that's what makes the remainder of this narrative unfold as it does. I didn't see a liar receiving her just desserts. I witnessed the final product of the factory where we both came from, even though she was one. They had constructed me into a net without ever considering the weight of the net. They had never trained her to stand, and had instead made her into a bundle that was always meant to be carried. The guys who had pledged to carry her came next. She was placed on the sidewalk and driven away by Kyle, Greg, and the whole group of people who shook hands. A bounced check had been used to purchase her allegiance. The bill was now dozing off in a vehicle. I contacted Pastor Hale first thing in the morning and informed him that a family in the church wanted to cover a week at the Falls Motor, in addition to shopping cards for a young mother who was in distress, without mentioning her name. And I meant the anonymity in its entirety. That evening, I saw the difference between being devoured by someone and assisting them. One is a toll, while the other is a gift. Greg Hartley entered my store on Friday, as if the cosmos were having a sale on my history. The handshake is still designed to sell you something, but it's thinner and grayer at the temples. Like an appraiser, he walked slowly around my waiting area, praising the flooring and coffee maker before making a sale to me. And I'll give him this. The man could still pitch standing in the rubble. He'd heard great things. He still had the Hartley name, the East End location, decades of goodwill, and I had his word, the talent, partnership, like old times but official this time, and he actually winked on the word official. Years too late. Somewhere mid-pitch, the truth fell out of his pocket. The bank was moving on his building, and the pitch was a man grabbing for a rope and calling it a merger. I let him finish. 19-year-old me would have already been drawing up how to save him. 34-year-old me would have at least felt the pull. 38-year-old me wiped down the counter and said, "I have a shop. It's not meant for sharing. You taught me that, and it's the one thing I owe you." He tried the grin, asked if I'd at least front him parts on credit. Buddy rates us being history and all. I pointed at the little board behind my register at Walt's father's amber paint. Fair price, paid in full, no favors. He read it twice like it might soften on the second pass. Then he called me cold, which from Greg is practically a diploma, and walked out to a truck. I noticed he was careful to park where I couldn't see the plates. I felt nothing I'd need to confess. That night at 9, my phone buzzed once. My mother, a single line, no greeting. "Sunday, we are all coming to talk some sense into you." Tuesday's coffee with Walt happened on Saturday that week because I called him, which I had never once done for a non-mechanical problem. He came in his church supper cardigan and sat in his chair and listened to the whole thing without moving. Then I asked him the question that had been idling under everything for 3 years. "Am I cruel, Walt?" He thought about it the way he thinks about a noise you can only hear in fourth gear long enough that you start to worry. Then he said, "I sold you this place because you pay what things cost. Cruel is teaching somebody the world owes them rent." He rinsed his cup, put it in the rack, and left me with that. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad because inventories are how I calm down. And I wrote out what I could actually give without setting myself on fire to reheat the family casserole. I needed counter help. That was simply true. Denny and I were drowning in paperwork every Friday. So, item 1, a job. 25 hours a week at Field's garage, front desk, posted wage, same up on the wall for anyone who walks in. Item 2, I called the number on the listing for the apartments over on Millbrook, the decent ones with the playground, and asked what it would take to hold a 2-bedroom deposit and first month payable direct to the landlord in Dana's name on Dana's lease. Not my couch, not my second bedroom, a floor of her own under her own feet, which is the one thing our family had never once thought to hand her. I closed the pad and sat there in my quiet house. They were coming on Sunday to make me choose between my house and my family. I'd spent the week building a third door, and I was reasonably sure nobody on that gravel had ever seen one. They came at 2:00 after church and lunch. 3 vehicles turning onto my gravel in a line like a procession. My mother's sedan washed for the occasion. Aunt Ruth's SUV and the minivan which told me the motel week had ended and the summit had been scheduled accordingly. My mother got out in her good lavender church suit. And that detail undid me a little. She had dressed up to come disown me or save me. In her mind, I truly believed those were the same errand. I met them in the yard at the picnic table Walt left behind between the house and the shop, and I did not invite anyone inside, and everyone registered it. The door I hadn't opened stood behind me the whole time like a witness. No coffee, no lemonade. This wasn't hospitality, it was a hearing. The second one my family had held on my property rights, and this time at least I'd get to speak. Mom opened the way matriarchs open, not with an argument, but with a genealogy. Family is what's left when everything else is taken. Nora, her mother, had taken in her brothers every fall, every time. She herself had taken in Uncle Dale's boy for 2 years in the 9s and fed him and asked nothing. Now it was my turn. That's how she said it. It's your turn. Like the netting of falling relatives was a chore wheel hung in some eternal kitchen. This is how family works, she said, and spread her hands. Done. The way you rest a case that has never once been appealed. Behind her, Dana stood with her arms crossed, confident again. The kids sat on the porch steps of a house they'd been promised. That was the field. Then came the shot. Ruth went next because Ruth is the network's loudspeaker and every summit needs one. Everyone is watching this. Nora, the whole congregation, the whole family, your cousins in Dayton. Did I understand what it looked like? A woman alone in a big house while her sister's babies slept in a motor lodge. A big house, 2 bedrooms, and a gravel yard. But in the family's mythology, my little lot had already grown wings and a west wing. And then my mother stepped past her, closed the distance, and I watched her gather herself the way people do before they lift something they know is too heavy for them. Her voice shook, and I wanted on the record that the shake was real. She believed every word she was about to spend. "Open that door for your sister," she said, "or you are no daughter of mine." The yard went very quiet, even Ruth, who has never met a silence she didn't fill. Tyler looked up from the porch steps, 8 years old, listening to grown women decide what family means. And I thought, there it is, the whole machine dressed for church and pointed at my front door. Wanna need if you've been keeping score. Behind me, a house with one name on the deed. In front of me, my mother offering the last version of her love I'd ever be offered, price sticker attached, and it was the old price. Everyone on that gravel believed there were only 2 doors I could walk through, hers or mine, and every face was set for one or the other. They'd driven out in a convoy to watch me choose between them. I looked at my mother's shaking hands and at my sister's crossed arms, and I opened the 3rd door instead. "No one is moving into my house," I said, and I said it quietly, and the quiet did more work than volume ever has. This house is the first thing I ever built that nobody can take from me. It is not the family safety net. There's no such job anymore. It closed. Ruth started up. I raised one hand, grease still in the knuckle creases, and she stopped. Then I took the folder off the picnic table, the plain manila one I'd set there before they arrived, and I laid it out for Dana item by item, the way I write an estimate, because an estimate is a kind of respect. A job at Field's garage, front counter, 25 hours a week to start, the wage posted on my wall, the same number Denny started at so nobody could ever call it charity and nobody could ever call it a leash. And an apartment on Millbrook, the 2-bedroom with the playground below the window. Deposit and first month already arranged with the landlord, payable direct, never touching her hands on a lease with one name on it, hers. "Your own floor," I said to my sister. "Your own key, your own paycheck. You never have to express gratitude to anybody during Thanksgiving, and no one carries you. Just one requirement. Whatever comes between you and me is granted as of right now. It is never stolen again. Here you may earn a spot. One cannot be claimed by you." Dana uncrossed her arms. She glanced over the folder and instinctively grabbed for the anthem. "You'll be okay." After hearing that statement for 15 years, you are always ultimately given an answer. Dana, I was never okay. I was only helpful. I no longer confused the two. Like a shop, my mother's face shuddered. She threatened to leave the yard if I let her to. Somewhere in there, her voice cracked on the word daughter. "Furthermore, I won't act as though it didn't cut." It made a complete cut. I said, "I know. Mom, I'm not going to shut the door. I just want to stop being the door that everyone passes via." She gave me a long look. My mother, 63, in her purple outfit. She then turned, went to her automobile, and drove away from my gravel. And when the price of your life is ultimately paid, it sounds like tires rolling slowly over stone. Naturally, Ruth followed her out, stopping only to say, in a tone that people use when they mean the contrary, that she would pray for me. Then there was just Dana, myself, the kids on the stairs, and a manila folder on a picnic table in the late afternoon light. No one said anything. Climbing down, Emmy tugged at her mother's hand. Just like a 5-year-old, I'm exhausted and over the theater. Dana gazed at the folder for a considerable amount of time. I also saw my sister balancing a floor she would have to earn against a sofa she owed using arithmetic she had never been taught. She didn't express regret. "I want to be honest with you." No embrace, no tears in the gravel, no cinematic scene in the corridor. Without looking at me, she picked up the folder. You can't dispute the manner you accept a part's invoice. After buckling her children, she drove away more slowly than she had ever left a place. She didn't leave it on the table, but she also didn't say yes. And it was the closest thing to a yes I had ever received from Dana. As my store cooled and my home did nothing but stand there, I sat on my porch steps until the light became copper. My own. At 8:02 on Monday morning, I turned on a new pot of coffee after hearing tires on the gravel and a belt screeching. She was punctual, hard-faced, and first performed poorly before improving. I chastised her in the same manner that I did Denny when she double-booked the alignment rack during her first week. She gazed at me, waiting for the rest of it, the lesson, the interest in the favor, but it never materialized because there was no favor. It was flat, specific once. A task was being done and the pay was posted. I gave the paychecks over the counter after 2 weeks, first Denny's, then hers. The same paycheck, same envelope. She held hers for a long time, snorting, the first money she's ever had. To keep the family neat, I'd bet everything that no one gave her anything, owing her anything, or slipped to her under a table. She didn't glance up while she spoke. I was never informed by Kyle that the rent was due until it was past due. That was all. It wasn't an apology. The seating itself was a bearing. And because you don't always interrupt repairs, I just nodded and left it sit. On a chilly morning that same month, the equipment passed the auction block as the bank closed its deal with H. Hartley Auto and Tire. I paid in full that afternoon after purchasing the good alignment lift via the internet market Price versus Strangers, and instead of walking that floor personally, I sent a hauler. I didn't need to say anything or see anything over there. Additionally, if Greg was seeing the transaction from a distance, he perceived me as offering a reasonable price and remaining silent. The whole fair price was paid. No favors. It functions in all directions. That is the sign's whole purpose. 4 months have passed since that Sunday on the gravel. And this is the current state of affairs. There are no bows on it. Dana continues to work 25 hours a week behind the counter. She is more adept than any of us anticipated, adept at managing the schedule, and dead on a double booking. Her name appears on the contract for the 2-bedroom apartment in Millbrook, and she paid the 2nd month's rent on her own. And the 3rd, she is using her own paycheck to pay off a previous collection obligation. Real individuals rise in installments without any miracles. Tyler and Emmy do their schoolwork at the waiting room table on Saturdays. Additionally, my father's Craftsman toolbox in the corner of Bay 1 has captured Tyler's heart. I heard my dad's words coming from my own lips last week when I led him to tighten his first bolt, hand over hand on the ratchet, tongue out sideways with concentration. Kiddo, snug is sufficient. Stripped does not equate to strong. That youngster would have appealed to Ray Fields. My mom hasn't given me a call. In December, a Christmas card arrived at the residence. Mom, no apology, no questions, was signed by her trembling hand, and I followed my usual procedure. I refrigerated it, and I just sent my own card in return. Ruth continues to recount her experience at First Baptist, signing it. Nora, no apology, no questions. The door isn't locked. It just doesn't swing one way anymore. I still sometimes lose customers because of it. And since the county trucks don't give a damn about my reputation, the shop is still fully scheduled for 2 weeks. Their breaks are important to them. I don't give Dana hugs. We discuss the timetable, the parts orders, her children, and brake pads. Every now and again, she says something that sounds like the beginnings of a courtroom discussion, and I let it begin and stop wherever it ends. We are no longer who we once were. We are a smaller, more hygienic, weight-bearing entity. And because of that, it is the strongest thing that anybody in this family has constructed in 3 generations. This is the current situation on Saturday at closing time. After closing the register and counting the drawer, Dana takes her children home to her apartment, where her own key unlocks the door. All the way down the driveway, Emmy gestures at me via the rear window, and I wave back till they disappear. I travel the 30 steps over the gravel to my own home, where my key on its simple steel ring unlocks the doors to rooms that respond to a single name. The kitchen light turns on the furnace ticks, and I lock the shop check the bay doors. And briefly put my palm flat on my dad's toolbox, an old habit now. For the first time in their lives, two ladies from the same workplace are standing on their own floor, far enough to stand, close enough to wave. This is what I now know, and learning it cost me a mother. Take it for free, then. Love that requires payment. As if love isn't a debt. And the day you cease serving as everyone's safety net is the day you discover who has always been watching out for you. That's my tale. One name on one deed. One sister, one paycheck at a time, making her way back. And there's still one door that won't open for anybody who doesn't knock first. Take today as your sign and safeguard everything you have created if you have ever been the strong one. Give this to someone in need. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next.